what really occurred. Examining the theories, the most widely accepted interpretation of the fatalities at Roopkund Lake has been a devastating hailstorm. Early investigators favored this idea because the skull damage closely resembled trauma that could be caused by large, fast-falling hail, some estimated to be the size of cricket balls. This notion fit well with ancient local legends, particularly one involving King Jasdeval and his group, who were said to have met their end due to a violent hail attack. Yet more recent scientific analyses have begun to challenge this hypothesis. While it's true that intense hailstorms sometimes strike the Himalayan region, skeptics point out that events violent enough to kill numerous people from varying time periods would be extremely uncommon. Furthermore, historical accounts and regional traditions rarely mention hail-related fatalities on such a scale. Given these doubts, experts have turned their attention to other potential explanations. One of the more credible ideas involves exposure to extreme cold and hypothermia. Roopkund sits at a high elevation where sudden weather changes like snow squalls or icy rain can strike without warning. Inadequate clothing or shelter under such circumstances could quickly lead to confusion, exhaustion, and death. This scenario might account for the widely scattered human remains discovered around the lake. However, this hypothesis doesn't fully clarify why people from vastly different time periods and geographic origins would all journey to such a remote and harsh environment, a place where survival would have always been tenuous at best. A particularly unexpected theory emerged from recent DNA analysis, which identified genetic markers suggesting that some of the dead may be linked to the Mediterranean region. This led to a compelling possibility that some of the victims could be descendants of Alexander the Great's reconnaissance units. In 326 BCE, Alexander's military forces advanced into northern India, and scouting missions were dispatched into distant Himalayan routes in search of possible pathways for expansion. According to some historians, isolated groups of those scouts may have become lost in the treacherous terrain and ultimately perished near Roopkund. This would align with the surprising European ancestry found in some of the skeletal remains. Still, despite its intrigue, this theory remains speculative. There is no solid archaeological or historical documentation directly tying these remains to Alexander's forces. Another, more contentious proposal suggests that some of the individuals may have died intentionally, possibly in connection to religious rites or spiritual self-sacrifice. Since Roopkund lies near well-known pilgrimage paths, it's plausible that certain groups made deliberate journeys to the lake as a final act of piety or devotion. Historical evidence from various cultures shows that ritual suicide or sacred death ceremonies were practiced. If true, this could help explain the minimal presence of personal belongings or burial goods, hinting at a premeditated, symbolic death. In addition to these theories, one less frequently discussed possibility involves toxic water. Contamination from bacteria like cholera or the presence of harmful algae could have turned the lake into a deadly trap. Throughout history, such waterborne illnesses have caused sudden mass deaths, especially in groups already weakened by long treks through the mountains. If these travelers drank polluted water from Roopkund, it might explain rapid deaths without visible signs of violence. That said, modern tests on the lake's water have revealed no trace of pathogens or toxins, making this theory difficult to confirm today. Another idea proposes that the bodies were not originally from the lake area, but rather carried down from higher elevations by avalanches. Over time, ice and snow slides might have deposited human remains into the lake basin. However, this explanation has drawn skepticism. The odds of multiple, unrelated groups venturing even higher into more dangerous territory above Roopkund and dying there are quite low. Furthermore, the condition of the skeletons, many of which remain largely intact and undisturbed, suggests they were not violently displaced by avalanches. While the avalanche theory is intriguing, it doesn't hold up well against current evidence. These varied possibilities continue to deepen the enigma of Roopkund Lake. In the end, many researchers believe that no single theory can account for the entire mystery. It's more likely that the site became the final resting place for several unrelated groups over the centuries. Factors such as brutal weather, hypothermia, sudden snowfalls, religious devotion, and perhaps even long-lost explorers may all have contributed. This multifaceted explanation could account for the diverse genetic origins, the scattered timelines, and the peculiar context in which the bodies were found, keeping Roopkund one of the most haunting archaeological puzzles in the world. Unveiling the mystery of the Skeleton Lake. High up in the Indian Himalayas lies Roopkund Lake, a remote and mysterious body of water located at an elevation of over 16,000 feet in the harsh terrain of Uttarakhand. Tucked away among craggy mountain ridges and treacherous frozen trails, this small glacial lake is barely visited. Despite its modest dimensions, roughly 40 meters in width and less than 10 feet deep, it holds one of the strangest secrets in the world. Reaching Roopkund is no easy feat. It takes nearly 5 days of grueling trekking through thick woodlands, scenic but steep meadows, and jagged alpine passes. For most of the year, the lake remains locked in ice. Only during a brief summer thaw does its chilling secret come into view. Survival in the lake's surroundings is nearly impossible for the ill-equipped. The environment is brutal. Biting cold, relentless winds, sudden blizzards, and rapidly shifting weather conditions test the limits of human endurance. Only sparse flora, such as low-lying alpine grasses, small shrubs, and tough wildflowers, survive the thin, oxygen-starved air. Animal life is similarly scarce, with only specially adapted creatures like snow leopards, Himalayan taurs, musk deer, and a few hardy bird species able to endure these elevations. These forbidding natural conditions are part of the reason why Roopkund was long seen as dangerous and unwelcoming. Generations of local shepherds were well aware of the lake's eerie presence. Though they whispered of it in hushed tones, they passed down warnings to keep away from this sacred and unsettling location. Outside of these remote communities, however, Roopkund remained virtually unknown. That changed dramatically in 1942. Kishan Madwell, a British forest ranger assigned to survey and patrol the area, was navigating the rugged highlands when he stumbled upon the lake. As he neared the shoreline, strange, pale shapes caught his eye. Objects scattered along the rocky edge that reflected the sun in an unnatural glint. Approaching more closely, Madwell was struck with unease. He quickly realized the white fragments were not rocks or ice, but human bones. Skulls, ribs, femurs, arms, jawbones, all lying exposed to the alpine air, some submerged in the lake's icy shallows. At first, Madwell assumed he had discovered the remnants of a recent catastrophe. Perhaps pilgrims overtaken by a blizzard or mountain travelers lost to the cold. But upon further inspection, the truth was more grim. The bones were weather-worn and sun-bleached, clearly having endured years, if not centuries, of exposure to the harsh Himalayan elements. Following Madwell's alarming discovery, researchers and experts soon made their way to this secluded site to investigate. What they uncovered was far more perplexing than anyone had anticipated. Rather than a small group of victims, they found the remains of hundreds of individuals scattered along the lake's perimeter and submerged just beneath its crystal-clear surface. Among the dead were men, women, and even children. All appeared to have died abruptly, with no immediate signs of violence or explanation. No garments, weapons, or belongings were found to help identify them or explain the circumstances of their deaths. This grim discovery earned Roopkund the chilling nickname, Skeleton Lake. Word of the lake's bizarre contents quickly spread, sparking global fascination. In the 1950s, some even speculated that the bones belonged to Japanese soldiers lost during World War II. But this theory was soon dismissed by later analysis, which dated the remains to long before the war. Despite decades of scientific research and archaeological effort, Roopkund continued to conceal its secrets. The pressing questions endured. Who were these people? Why had such a large group assembled in one of the world's most hostile environments? And above all, what caused their sudden, mass death? Ghostly tales of the vanished wanderers. To begin untangling the mystery of Roopkund Lake, it's essential to explore not only scientific evidence, but also the ancient traditions and oral histories of the communities who have lived near the lake for countless generations. Long before modern experts ever studied the site, the local villagers had their own interpretations, stories deeply embedded in their culture and passed down through centuries. One of the most enduring and widely believed legends speaks of an ancient monarch named King Jasdaval. According to this tale, the king set out on a journey through the Himalayas with his pregnant queen, accompanied by a large entourage that included soldiers, entertainers, musicians, and attendants. Their destination was the revered temple of the goddess Nanda Devi, a powerful and sacred figure in the region. The king hoped to honor the goddess and seek her blessings for the child his queen was expecting. But something about the grand nature of this royal expedition reportedly offended the goddess. Some accounts claim the journey was excessively opulent and disrespectful to the humility expected in her worship. Others believe the queen's presence, being pregnant, violated ancient customs that prohibited expectant women from approaching the sacred grounds. Whatever the true reason, the legend says that Nanda Devi was enraged. As punishment, she summoned a violent storm of hailstones. Massive chunks of ice, described as being the size of cricket balls, rained down from the sky, striking King Jasdaval and his entire company. With no trees, caves, or shelters near the exposed terrain of Roopkund Lake, the entire group was left defenseless. The king, his queen, and everyone traveling with them perished in the sudden and brutal storm. Yet the story of King Jasdaval is only one among many myths surrounding the lake. For generations, the area around Roopkund has been deeply linked to religious pilgrimages to the shrine of Nanda Devi. Each year, devoted villagers and travelers brave the rugged terrain and unpredictable mountain weather to reach the sacred site, located deep within the Himalayas. This pilgrimage is seen as a spiritual trial. Those who complete it are believed to receive blessings and divine protection. But the journey is perilous, and not all who embark upon it return. Over time, tales began to circulate of those who disappeared during the trek, pilgrims who may have unknowingly broken taboos, lost their way, or shown unintended disrespect to the goddess. These whispered accounts led many to believe that the scattered skeletons around Roopkund were the remains of these unfortunate worshippers, victims of divine wrath. As stories spread and villagers shared their beliefs, the lake gained a mystical reputation. It became a place regarded with both awe and dread, a solemn reminder of the potential consequences of crossing unseen spiritual boundaries. For many years, these local legends served as the primary explanation for the haunting remains at the lake. However, when modern scientists began their detailed investigations into Roopkund, they uncovered a far more intricate and multi-layered narrative, one that challenged and expanded upon the ancient folklore that had dominated understanding of the lake for so long. Science reveals a greater enigma. When Roopkund Lake was initially brought to scientific attention, early researchers believed that all the skeletal remains belonged to a single catastrophic incident, possibly a religious pilgrimage gone awry or travelers unexpectedly trapped by a severe mountain storm. For many years, this straightforward explanation seemed entirely plausible. However, in recent years, new scientific advancements have transformed this simplistic narrative, uncovering layers of complexity that few anticipated. According to estimates by National Geographic, the lake contains between 500 to 800 skeletons that are visible, with the actual total likely higher. Many bones are believed to be buried beneath rocks, concealed by moving sediment, or gradually lost due to erosion and human activity over the decades. This astonishingly large number suggests not just one isolated misfortune, but rather a series of tragic incidents involving multiple groups of individuals who ventured into the desolate Himalayan heights, each ultimately facing a deadly end. The scientific effort to unravel this mystery began in earnest in the early 2000s, during the early days of DNA testing. Initial analyses back then concluded that all the remains were of South Asian origin, and that the individuals had died sometime around 800 AD. At the time, researchers theorized that the victims had fallen through thin ice, leading to their untimely deaths. The evidence pointed to a group that included both males and females, mostly between the ages of 18 and 35, along with the remains of children. While this painted a clear picture, it was far from complete. But dramatic improvements in DNA sequencing and radiocarbon dating have since reshaped this early theory. In 2019, a collaborative team of geneticists, archaeologists, and historians from institutions such as Harvard University, the Birbal Sahni Institute in India, and genetics labs in Hyderabad returned to Roopkund Lake with the goal of solving its long-standing enigma once and for all. They plan to utilize cutting-edge DNA profiling and advanced carbon dating methods to identify the individuals and determine the circumstances of their deaths. What they found, however, was far more intricate than they had expected. The latest analysis delivered a surprising conclusion. Roopkund Lake had not witnessed a single tragic event, but rather a series of separate calamities spanning nearly a millennium. A comprehensive study of 38 skeletons revealed that these individuals belonged to distinct populations originating from different periods in history. Of the 38, 23 had South Asian ancestry, but even they did not come from the same era. Some remains dated as far back as the 7th and 8th centuries, while others appeared to be from the 10th century. This crucial detail disproved the earlier assumption that all the bodies belonged to a single moment in time. Even more astonishing was the discovery of another group of 14 individuals who lived much later, around the 17th and 18th centuries, and had genetic ties to the Mediterranean, specifically to the island of Crete in Greece. This finding shocked researchers, as there were no historical records linking Mediterranean populations to this remote region of the Himalayas. Further DNA analysis uncovered evidence of at least one individual with Southeast Asian roots, deepening the mystery and raising even more baffling questions. Why did people from such distant lands and separated time periods repeatedly converge at this harsh, remote location? And why did they all suffer the same tragic fate? Despite exhaustive research, scientists are still unable to fully explain what led these different groups to Roopkund Lake, or how they all met their end in such a desolate place. In response to these puzzling results, the Harvard-led team partnered with Indian archaeologists to conduct a more detailed investigation. Experts from the Birbal Sahni Institute examined organic material and sediment samples around the lake in hopes of discovering additional insights. Meanwhile, geneticists from Hyderabad continued deep genetic profiling, confirming a mix of South Asian, Mediterranean, and Southeast Asian ancestries. From these studies, several compelling theories have emerged. One leading theory is that Roopkund may have served as a sacred pilgrimage destination over multiple centuries. The Himalayas are home to many revered shrines and temples, and it's plausible that the lake was once a site of religious importance, attracting devotees despite the risks of traveling through the unforgiving terrain. Another possibility is that the lake was situated near ancient mountain trade corridors that connected regions like India, China, Tibet, and Central Asia. Traders, nomadic groups, or messengers might have strayed from established paths, possibly in an attempt to avoid storms or shorten their journey, only to unknowingly enter a perilous environment. Forensic studies of the bones offered some support to these ideas. Many of the skeletons showed signs of heavy trauma consistent with injuries caused by large hailstones, suggesting that severe weather may have played a recurring role in the deaths. Other injuries indicated accidents such as avalanches or falls, reinforcing the theory that various disasters occurred at the site over centuries. Another potential explanation is illness. Disease outbreaks may have weakened groups of travelers, making them more vulnerable to the already brutal high-altitude conditions. Adding further complexity to the puzzle is the absence of significant cultural or personal items among the remains. Only a few modest belongings were discovered: pieces of cloth, bamboo parasol handles, simple footwear, shell earrings, and handcrafted wooden tools. There were no signs of weapons, religious objects, valuable items, or trade goods. This lack of artifacts suggests that those who died here were caught off guard, likely unprepared for the grim fate that awaited them. Ultimately, scientific findings indicate that Roopkund Lake was the site of multiple unrelated fatal events involving different groups from vastly separate regions and historical periods. While the discoveries have shed significant light on the lake's haunting mystery, the core question still endures. Why did people from across centuries and continents keep arriving at this isolated Himalayan lake only to perish in the same tragic way? Unanswered questions that still linger. The enigmatic site of Roopkund has led some specialists to propose that this remote lake may once have held a significant spiritual or symbolic importance, one that modern understanding has yet to uncover. Other theorists suggest even more unconventional possibilities, such as the lake being regarded as a mystical healing destination, much like other revered locations across the globe. In this interpretation, those who ventured to Roopkund might have been seeking restoration or relief from illness, which could explain the absence of personal items. Many may have arrived already weakened and ultimately succumbed to the extreme environment. With global warming gradually melting the ice surrounding Roopkund, scientists anticipate discovering additional skeletal remains and lost artifacts. They are optimistic that breakthroughs in technology, such as high-resolution DNA sequencing, isotope testing to reconstruct ancient diets and geographic origins, and subsurface radar scanning, will provide greater clarity about the identities of those buried here and the reasons behind their presence. A key objective for researchers is determining whether these individuals had set out on intentional religious pilgrimages, were accidental wanderers, or were drawn to the location due to some now forgotten historical or spiritual relevance. Roopkund has also inspired more imaginative and speculative interpretations. Some individuals have claimed to witness mysterious lights or strange aerial phenomena in the Himalayan skies, leading to theories involving extraterrestrial involvement or paranormal forces, although there is currently no scientific evidence supporting such claims. Another theory, equally captivating yet unproven, suggests the area may have once been part of ancient trade routes or exploration networks that linked far-flung civilizations. While there's no concrete data backing these ideas, their popularity demonstrates just how fascinating and mysterious the story of Roopkund remains. Today, researchers from India and across the world, including archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians, are working hand in hand to protect and study the site with extreme care. They are using digital tools to meticulously record the location of each bone and artifact, constructing an in-depth and accurate historical archive. At the same time, scientists are increasingly turning to the region's oral traditions and folk narratives, recognizing that these community-held stories may hold pieces of the larger puzzle. For those who live near Roopkund, emotions about the lake are deeply mixed. Locals continue to honor the lake's sacred and legendary status, yet they are also wary of the growing number of visitors. While tourism brings much-needed economic benefits, villagers express concern over disrespectful behavior. Some tourists have been known to remove bones as keepsakes or damage the fragile environment unknowingly. Community elders frequently remind the younger generation of the lake's cultural importance, striving to preserve its spiritual dignity in the face of modern pressures. As new findings surface year after year, researchers remain cautiously optimistic. They believe that ongoing collaboration and advancements in science will eventually unlock the full story of Roopkund, revealing once and for all why people from such diverse regions and vastly different time periods kept arriving at this remote Himalayan lake, only to meet a mysterious and tragic end.